National University and also GSD, Harvard. And he's the author of many books. I Want to Be a Metropolitan, and also Pyongyang After, and many other books. And he's very famous right now in Seoul and all around the world. He won numerous awards. Okay, without further ado, let's introduce Dongwoo Yim. Thank you. Hello.
Hi, everyone. It's
Hello.
great to see you. And I don't know why this lecture is set up as early in the morning lecture. I can see some people are kind of still falling asleep. It's fine. In your age, you have to sleep more. Right? But anyways, it's great to see, to meet you, online meet you. This is quite an interesting era, I think, and I believe this will change the whole, let's say, perception of meetings and educations and everything. So maybe something that you guys also have to think about as an architect, right? So let me share the screen first, so that I can start the lecture. Can you see the screen well?
Yes, no problem.
Okay, good. So, as noticed in advance, the title of the lecture is called Topology and Typology. It is kind of a made-up word by us, and we'll obviously go through some of our projects, but in fact, most of the talk will be sharing some questions that I like to raise. This is a question that I have and my business partner have, and our company always tries to pursue the process of answering to this question. Also, I also do share this question with my students, and this is one of the theory class that I teach in Hongik University in Korea. So again, I run an office called PRAUD, but I put it with A, not with O, because we're architects. And PRAUD is founded in 2010 between myself and Rafael Luna, and I'm sure that sometime in the future you will also have. You don't have to have, but many times you have your business partner for the office, or like your professors, their business partner as well as life partners. Right? But the people or the architects who have the partners, they always have trouble because, for example, let's say I like this or I like that, whatever, but then Rafael says, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that, or vice versa, right? So it is kind of, as you know, that architecture is not a science, it's not engineering, it's not mathematics. So there's no kind of a very straight answer to all the questions. But at the same time, there can be some shared ideology. That I think that's the beauty of architecture, right? It cannot be fully subjective, but it's still not fully objective, right? So there's some middle ground between subjective answer and objective solutions. So as we joined together as one office, instead of trying to, let's say, split the work, right? We used to work at the Children's Tibeti, and they're also partners, and they never do projects together, right? So one does one project, and while the other one does the other, right? But we thought that, oh, maybe we shouldn't do that. We should think together, work together, and make some synergy out of it. So basically, that's the question that we had. So we had a lot of conversations about how we think about architecture and so on, and realized that we were both interested in the question of what is contemporary architecture. So basically, it's not about whether I like square and you like circle, or I like triangle and you like rectangle. It's not about that. It's about, okay, what is contemporary architecture? And then what we do would like to be the pursuit of contemporary architecture. That's what we were discussing. An interesting thing is that if you Google contemporary architecture, this is the image that you'll see. I mean, this image itself is not important. You'll have different results. I'll have different results. Everyone will have different results, but it will be more or less similar to this. And the question is, can we say all of them are contemporary architecture, right? Maybe or maybe not. So it's a question that you may want to raise for yourself as well. In fact, the Wikipedia, I mean, it doesn't have to be Wikipedia, but any dictionary will say the contemporary architecture is the architecture of the 21st century. So it says it's 21st century, right? But with no single style is dominant, right? It has several different styles, right? So it's kind of very vague because it says there's no style. It's just architectures in 21st century. So what you're doing is can be contemporary architecture. What he's doing can be contemporary architecture. Everything is contemporary architecture, right? But maybe not, right? That's kind of a critical question that we may ask. So again, if the contemporary architecture is defined based on the time period, what can we say? If you translate modern architecture or modernism, it's the Chinese character means recent period, right? 근대. I don't know how it can be pronounced in Chinese, but the Chinese character is 근대, right? Recent period. And contemporary architecture is present period, right? So even the language itself, especially in Chinese, in Asian culture, the word contemporary architecture and modernism is defined by the time period, right? But is it true? Is it true? One big question that we can ask is, then what about this? The project on the right by Adolf Loos Steinerhaus, that's considered as the birth of the modernism, right? In the same year, Gaudi had Gazamian. Obviously, I mean, I cannot say that Gaudi's project is not part of the modern architecture, but still, the point is that if the modernism is defined by something else other than just the time period, right? Because as we know that we call one as the mother of modernism, while the other one has its own unique part. So if the modernism is not defined by the time period, but defined defined by some other language, can a contemporary architecture do the same thing? As I mentioned, the modern architecture, again, same definition from Wikipedia, is based on new and innovative technologies of construction. And it goes on, and then the idea that form should follow function, embrace minimalism, and a rejection of ornament, right? So you've heard about all these things for the modern architecture, right? So compared to contemporary architecture, modern architecture has very strict definition about its own language. So if the modernism is not about the time period, but about the architectural language, can we define contemporary architecture with its own language? So as you know that in English, modernism is written with capital M because it's a language. So can we say contemporaryism with capital C, and can we put ism there as a theory or ideology, right? So again, I'm not saying that we can, but this is something that we're trying to pursue and trying to see other architects' projects through this lens. Then I think the question can be rephrased, right? As what type of architecture can be considered as contemporary architecture, right? So as I showed you in the Google search, let's say there are 50 different projects. And if we say that, oh, out of those 50 projects, we can say that only these 5 projects can be considered as contemporary architecture if there was a language that defines contemporary architecture, right? Then that means that out of 50, what type of architecture is considered as contemporary architecture, right? So it's the question can be rephrased. And the beauty of architecture, right, is that we have history and theory and criticism. So even though you may be interested in designing a building and all these architectural, let's say, styles and designs and all these things, but again, do remember that in architecture, we are always the one that differentiates architecture from other design field is that we do have quite serious history and theory. So the good thing is that the good thing of learning history or reading history books or theory books is that there are always some background knowledge that supports your idea, right? So you just have to find the proper reference for you. So the reference that we had was The Third Typology by Tony Vidler. So he wrote an essay in the 70s about the third typology, and then there he defines that there are 3 different types of typologies, right? So again, I'm not trying to argue against it. I'm trying to bring it as my supporting reference. And he says, Tony Vidler says, there's first typology in architectural history that is more about elements. So when the conversations or when the questions of what is architecture, when those questions arose, architects thought about, okay, what are the fundamental elements that cannot be removed to become an architecture, right? Does that make sense, right? So in Western architecture, it's different from Asian architecture, but in Western architecture, these columns, entablatures, and pediments. Those are the three fundamental elements that cannot be removed if you want to call it as an architecture, right? So these three elements become the fundamental things that that compose architecture. And with that idea, Durand sketches all different types of plans, elevations, and door styles, and everything. So in the first typology that Tony Viller argues is that architecture is basically a composition of all these elements, right? So the way how you designed was also based on these elements, right? You have learned it from the Western architecture history, right? So it's just basically drawing the elevation with a certain style of the windows, certain styles of the doors or pediments, and you draw the plan based on the certain types of the function that you want to have, right? So it's basically the combinations of all these things. So then that's done, right? You're done with the design. How easy, right? So it's relatively, I think it was relatively easy. And then if that was the case in the 21st century, I think the computers will design everything, right? It's easy because it's a combination of elements. Then in the early 20th century, as we know, a genius guy, love him. Everybody loves him, I think. Le Corbusier argued that the architecture is not about elements. Those are just very ornamental things. It's more about the system behind it. Why? Because the architecture has to be mass produced, right? And to mass produce things, the new technologies in building construction can be reflected, and we can have this type of, for example, domino system to mass produce it, right? So it is true that before the modernism, not everybody had a good architecture building, right? Because the building a building was too expensive. But because of thanks to the modernism, all these construction costs came down, so things can be, or many people could afford their own buildings, right? So basically, so it's not about the elements that you see on the facade. So what Corbusier gave us as a gift was this: the free facade and free plan, because the facade does not the facade no longer attached to the structural system. You can just draw whatever facade you like, right? Think about it. Isn't that how you design in the studio, right? You just draw plan section, everything's so good. And in the, like, let's say a week before the final, you just draw whatever elevation you want to draw, right? If you're designing in a 15th century or 16th century, the elevation should be the first thing that you should draw, because that's how the loads are carried on, right? So if you don't know how the loads will be carried on, you basically cannot design anything. But the new system by Corbusier, he was showing how things can be detached, right? And the third typology, lastly, was about the forms. So basically, the historical permanence of the city were encoded in forms. That's basically starting from the 60s. And I'm sure that this is very much, let's say, influential to your design these days. So for Rossi and all these James Sterling, those 60s architects, it's not about the system, or it's not about the elements on the facade. It's about the form, the compositional form between the buildings and the building itself has some meaning to it, right? So that's basically the idea of the third typology. And as a topology and typology, we're not trying to tackle one of three typologies, but we're trying to combine these three and then ask whether they can be kind of pursued all together. That's basically the question. So going back to the topology itself. So again, the topology is about the form, and the form is in the third typology, right? Like the Rossi's building. So we thought that, oh yeah, so basically it's not about geometric shape, but it's about the three-dimensional form. How do we understand architecture as three-dimensional form rather than through plan or sections, right? And we borrowed that term topology from mathematics. And as you know, that topology is sort of a theory or the concept in mathematics that went way beyond the Euclidean geometry, right? So before the topology, everything, all the world was conceived based on the geometric idea, right? And back then, that's how you design, right? So for the Euclidean geometry, the only thing that you needed was the main line, right? Basically, because everything is geometric shape, so it has 45-degree ruler triangle and 30-60-degree triangle, because you never have to draw, let's say, the degree of 13 or degree of 47, right? But then in topology, things are more three-dimensional. We just understand things with three-dimensional form as one thing. So if we go back to the history, the Euclidean geometry, their architecture was something like on the left. So basically, you just draw the circle in plan, or draw circle in section, or triangle in elevation, or rectangle in somewhere, right? That's how you design. And I hope that you don't design that way. And for the topology, it's more about understanding the three-dimensional form. So this famous sketch by, collage by Lissitzky in the 20s, 100 years ago, things were represented with perspective or the form itself. It's not about the plan or the elevation of it. It's about three-dimensional form. So that one was quite interesting. That maybe the contemporary architecture was are trying to pursue this idea of three-dimensional form. And as you know, that all these crazy paper architecture influence contemporary architecture, right? So, for example, how the horizontal movement emphasized by Lissitzky was somewhat influenced to CCTV Beijing by OMA, or Cloud Parents' crazy idea of the oblique. MBRDV somewhat borrowed that idea of how things can be delivered. And Yona Freeman, who actually passed away a few months ago, how architecture can occupy the urban space three-dimensionally. So it's not just about the ground, but it's also about the sky. That's also influenced to some other contemporary architecture. But thanks to the technology now, I mean, of course, you cannot let a building fly, but at least you can make those type of gestures, right? Or Vesnine Brothers ideas can be realized by contemporary architecture. So they're all about three-dimensional kind of occupations of urban space. So urban space is not just the surface on the ground, but it's about how you occupy basically the sky as well, right? And the plan on the top floor is different from the plan on the first floor. That's how the contemporary architecture is pursuing. So I'll say the topology redefines traditional relationship between presence and absence, solid and void, in architecture and urban context, and sets a new horizon of three-dimensionality in architecture. So it cannot be understood two-dimensionally, but it's three-dimensional gestures. The other thing is the first and the second typology, the system and the elements, as I said. So again, the first typology was all these elements are bound to the structure, and in the domino system, the new system allowed the facade to be independent from the system, right? So here's another question. Is this a penguin or a man? This is, in fact, quite a famous character in Korea for kids. But anyways, we all know that there's a man inside, right? We don't say this is a penguin, right? The same thing happens to the lion costume, whatever, right? So let's bring it to the architectural world. So again, as I said, the modernism gave us a gift to design the facade to whatever we want. So let's say there's a domino system. On the facade, you can put horizontal windows like modernism, or glass curtain walls, or some digital fabrication, or whatever material, whatever you want. But again, the question is, if the digital fabricated facade is attached to the domino system, is it modern architecture, or is it a contemporary architecture? In my argument, it is still contemporary architecture, because the crazy shape or crazy ideas on the facade is given by Corbusier, right? But back in the days, 100 years ago, it is just that the horizontal windows was the trend. So they argued that you should do horizontal windows, but the trend has changed, so the facade changes. But the system of architecture is never changed, right? That's how we mostly design, at least in Korea. So the question is, how can we go beyond modernism? If we are trying to talk about contemporary architecture, how can we go beyond modernism? That's the question. And obviously, there are great architects, contemporary architects, who challenged these systems fundamentally. So like or Kunstal, starting with Kunstal, how this domino system can be broken with using the slab ramp or ramp slab, or like Sendai Mediatek by Toyo Ito, how the columns can start housing certain type of program, in this case, circulations and all these ductworks, right? So the column is not just for the structural reason, but also for other things. Or his other project in Serpentine Pavilion, or his Thoughts store, and some other projects, how the structure itself can be expression of the building, right? So why do we have to have a facade that has nothing to do with the system? Let's bring that back to the facade, and let's bring the facade back to the system, right? So that's how you do. And also the vertical circulation. Can a vertical circulation be more than just the circulation so that it becomes a core, right? As well as the structure in the middle. So now we don't need any other columns, right? So these are kind of contemporary architects' challenge to the modernism, right? So if we say that all these facade, columns, slab, walls, stairs, these are the elements that we can call from the modern architecture. There are architects that directly challenges that. For example, like Toyoto's Taichung Opera House, is that a facade? Is that a column? Is that a slab, a wall? We don't know because there's no strict boundary between them, right? So it's kind of all merged, right? So I'll say the typology blurs boundary between the architectural elements and pursues how they can be synthesized together to create architectural system that allows express itself. So again, it's not about putting column as an element, facade as an element, slab as an element, but something, I don't know what that is, some integrated system can function as a facade, function as a circulation, function as a column, and whatsoever, right? So that's kind of the thing that we're trying to argue, that there are contemporary architects who are trying to pursue going beyond modernism in many ways. And for us as well, that we're trying to make a lineage of that history and also contribute to that conversation. So I will briefly go through 3 projects of ours. They're all competition projects because we only built small projects. And I think the competition projects have, let's say, stronger idea that we're trying to say, whereas all these build projects, we always have to compromise. There's always some issues with the contractor and budget and client, whatever. So, but if I have other chance, I'll show you some other project how our efforts are transmitted to the build works. But today, because it's in the morning, I'll show you some competition works. So the first one is main library of Gwangju. It's not Gwangju, China. We also have Gwangju in Korea. Very recent competition project. So here I don't want to go through every single corner of the project, but rather just focus on the topology and typology and how the form and the system makes, or the form and the system are synthesized and make an architecture as itself, right? So basically, it was the surrounding area had parks and rivers and everything. So we thought that, oh, we would like to bring all these activities from the surrounding to the library because it's a public library, right? And then because it had views to the river, views to the front park, views to the future to be museums, we thought that, oh, we would like to open up the views to all these 4 corners and also use them as a flow to bring the outside activities to the inside. So we thought that it is important to open up the corner, right? But then we saw this project by Oscar Niemeyer. It's a simple table design that, by displacing the locations of the column, it actually creates quite an interesting moment, right? So the structure itself is still very simple, but these corners are pretty much open to the surrounding, right? So let's bring this idea into our structure system. So we had the form, right? And then we put all these 4 corners so that structurally it will look very challenging, but the structure itself should be very stable. That's always what we are trying to achieve. So the building always looks very fragile, but structurally very stable. That's how we design. So in those 4 corners, we put cores, the vertical cores, so that the cores can also function as structure, and also all these process led us to have the top mass sitting on the surface without really closing off the corners, right? So basically, that's one of the views from Plaza. So all these, all 4 corners were open so that the outside activities can flow in. Obviously, those are the kind of the stat library, reading rooms, and so on. So through that, we could achieve again all these views to the surrounding. I don't know whether you can see from the second image, but on all the way back, you can see 2 corners are open, so you see the views to the outside. So it creates some panoramic effect, because you are seeing one corner and the other corner at the same time, right? So basically, that's how this building tries to communicate with the surrounding, right? By bringing them from every single corner to the inside of the building. So this is the image. Again, as I said, we're trying to bring in the surrounding, either scenes or activities or views to the library. Also, the library activities spilled out to the outside. That's kind of the concept. The next project is Dubai Expo Korean Pavilion. It was also a big competition project, I think 2 years ago or a year ago. So you know that Dubai Expo will open this year. I don't know whether they're going to open, because even Venice Biennale is postponed. So anyways, so in this Dubai Pavilion, the site that Korean Pavilion was given was quite interesting site, that it was the 75% of the site was open to the street. All right, so basically it's at the corner, and it had to invite people from all surrounding, whereas many other countries were given on the site that had a front facade, but this one had all direction coming in. So we thought that, oh, all directions, octagonal shape. You know, I mean, the octagonal shape is considered in Asian architecture or Chinese architecture. Octagonal shape is considered as like all orientation, right? So yeah, let's bring all these things. But then we try to make the octagonal shape with 2 different forms. So actually not 2 different forms, it's 1 form but rotated. So basically it's a crossing form, and then when it's stacked, it rotates 45 degrees. So that as a combination, it creates octagonal shape, right? Then again, in this one, we wanted to stretch out as much as possible, right? Because we had to have quite a big empty space in the building, right? So that's how we wanted to do. Then we realized that this cantilever should be like almost 20 meters or something. Then we realized that it's not realized, but basically that's a rule of thumb in structural engineering, that when you do cantilever, if it is towards the both sides, it's so easy. It's so easy. So if you want to cantilever, let's say 10 meters from to only one side, it is difficult. But if you want to cantilever 20 meters on both sides, it's balancing out. So there are projects that are using that idea, right? So we worked with the structural engineer called Lara from the United States. They're a very big firm, and they kind of gave us some calculations of this, and then we were able to achieve this large cantilever building. So again, I think it is important to work with a structural engineer, because that's how you can really prove that your design can be achieved without much compromise. So basically, the center part is always empty, and then it stretched out to the either side of the form, so it creates the crossing. Obviously, the core always has to be remain. It doesn't always have to be, but in this building it did. So basically, that's how it does, and then because of that, the center part can always be very flexible. So depending on the program, you always can have different programs in the middle, because we were able to get rid of all these columns in the middle, right? Because we could get rid of it because it was cantilevered as well, right? So that's kind of if you think about cantilever, it's very hard or whatever, but think about it. If you make it well, it gives you more advantage of not having columns in the middle. The last project will be Helsinki Public Library. It's been a while. I think it was a competition in 2012 or 20, I don't know. It's a very old project, but I like this project because it shows a lot of ideas of ours. So again, this the form itself, it's very simple. Like you guys also do a lot of diagrams like this, but basically, we wanted to make like a bowl type of building, because that's how the building should react to the surrounding context, right? So we had the bowl, but then because we had to stabilize the structure of the bowl, we had to do something on the top, right? So basically, the whole process was about how to stabilize the building. So when you have a bowl, there's a cantilever part that's going forward. So we put truss system there, and then when you put truss system, there's a lateral force, right? So then we put a concrete tube to stabilize it, and then there's the momentum, right? To stabilize that, we put a tensile system. So it's almost like if you hold a name card, it always wants to go back. But then if you put a tape there, the tape is a tensile system, it kind of stabilizes, right? So the form itself, it could look like a weird form, but the form itself gives a structural system. So it's not like you build a form and put a domino system and put a whatever, but basically the structural system will not work without that form, right? That's how we're trying to make a harmony between them. Again, we like to find some references from the past. And this is another project, structural engineer by Lara. So they're using this catenary curve and this bridge type structure in a building, and everything is with the wire cables. So all the slabs are hung to this system, right? So basically, there were people doing it. So it's not only us who's doing that. So again, because of that system, the top floor is all tensile structure, so we could get rid of all the columns, and then because of the top one, we had that living room it's a donut shape. So in the middle, there's a universal space, columnless space that we could achieve. So that's kind of the view that you see in the middle. So and by the way, that living room in the middle was not required by the competition brief, but because of the form, we could be able to achieve a new program, or we could suggest a new program there. So, and again, as you can see, we don't have a separate facade system. It's all expression of the structural system and the form, right? That's how we design. So I think that's pretty much it. Any questions?
Yes. Thank you. Beautiful projects. They're really amazing. I didn't realize you'd done so much after graduation.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while, yes. So if the first typology is about element, the second typology is about system, and the third one is about form, can we say you are doing the fourth typology?
To be honest, in the beginning, we wanted to argue that we are doing the fourth, but I'll say that the more important thing is, again, making the first, second, and third typology as a kind of approaching it as a synthetic gesture. And then maybe it can evolve as a fourth typology in the future. Maybe somebody will define it. Some historians or theorists will define it. But for us, at the moment, I'm not there to say we're doing the fourth typology, but we're trying to kind of tackle all this type of typology so putting them all into one melting pot, I'll say.
Okay, so can you elaborate on the typology, like the fourth, let's just call it the fourth typology you're working on? What is the difference between the fourth and the third one or the second?
I'll say maybe it's because of how Tony Viller kind of differentiated them, but I think that again, going back to the first question of going beyond modernism and defining contemporary architecture, then that means that, again, we cannot just rely on the modern system that that was developed in the modern period. And then the third typology, even though it's the first, second, third typology is very periodical, I don't necessarily think one kind of the third typology overwrites the second typology. I think they're all separately. So in that sense, I thought that even the third typology doesn't really go beyond the second typology, right? It is still within the realm. So if we may say the fourth typology, it's about, okay, that there's no division between these three, but it's basically a merge of them. So as I said, like, for example, the form can be achieved without really bringing any new system. We can just put domino system inside and then put a donut building there. But our question is that true? Is that the best way? Or is that, or should the system follow the form? Or shouldn't it be the other way, that something like the last project that I showed, we just wanted to have a bowl, but then it turned out to be like a donut building because of the structural system, that because it stabilizes better. So is the form a system or not? I think it is, the boundary is not clear anymore. And I think that's kind of the argument that we're trying to make. So the kind of partition between all these elements or the definitions of typology, they're basically blurred. And as I said briefly, it's not just us who is pursuing that, but there are contemporary architects who are trying to break that boundary, I think.
Okay, like the title of the lecture is Topology and Typology.
Mm-hmm.
So if we say the third typology is about form, can we say the fourth is about formless? Because like topological geometry versus Euclidean geometry or archive geometry or projective geometry, the difference is like it's formless. Like you cannot describe it or depict it through form. So what do you think of the formless typology? How would you define that?
Right, like first project, it's less, I think it's less systematic or structural. It's more about formless and finding the potential inside the formless, right?
So I think I think that's, I'll say I partly agree and I partly disagree, in a sense that I do agree that the formless is kind of let's say evolution from the formal approach. And I think that all these let's say undefinable forms that we see these days, I think that's totally let's say being apart from the formal discussions that had happened in the 60s, right? As I briefly said, that in the 60s, or the third typologies, they thought that the historical memories and context are encoded in the forms. But the formless, if I understood it correctly, the formless is not so much about that, right? So basically, the formless, let's say, formless reflects less of historic context of the city, basically. So in that sense, I think, yes, it is evolved and apart from the formal discussions. But at the same time, the reason why I partly disagree is that because there's like a huge, let's say, discussions in the forums, somewhat expecting the formless, basically. So, for example, like there's a crazy guy, forgot his name, but basically, I mean, even let's say John Hader, all these the argument in autonomous forms, I'll say, I think it is attached to the formulas that we are talking about these days, right? So basically, the form doesn't have to follow function. The form doesn't have to follow anything. If you give me any form, like let's say alphabet A, I'll just make it into house. Basically, that's kind of the approach. So then, is A really a form or formless? It's kind of something. So I think that the formless conversation is somewhat still attached to the conversations of autonomous form, I think. I don't know whether that makes sense, but.
You also mentioned there's a kind of hybrid in the process. Can you elaborate on the hybrid? Is it hybrid in form or hybrid in structure or hybrid in program or hybrid in circulation system?
At this moment, it's basically a hybrid between the system, form, and elements. And most of the times it becomes the system and the form. So again, most of our projects, we try to not disguise the system. So what you see from outside is somewhat the reflection of the system, and it becomes the form itself. So basically, the argument was that, oh, why do we have to design something, everything, or make a form, and then what we see from outside is something else that covers the periphery of the building? But can we just show the system and the elements inside of the building? So that means that we cannot just show it. It has to be somewhat pretty. So then the system itself should somewhat reflect the system should expect that it will be shown from outside. So it cannot be just like let's say a boring stupid column, but it has to be aesthetically pleasing as well. So that's kind of the moment that the hybridization of form and system and elements gives us a question of how to design the system differently, or how do we manipulate the form differently.
So, like, here comes the question. After you have the new typology, how would you approach the architecture expression, like the architecture form, so-called, the expression? How would you break the formal grounds of architecture expression, like previous architecture expression? How would you?
I think
a rational move. Yes.
I think I don't know whether I'm approaching to responding to your question properly, but the reason why these conversations makes more sense these days is because now we see architecture as a whole thing. because now we have drone, we have airplane, we see something from the sky and something from the ground and whatever, right? So no matter how big the building is, there are always chances that we perceive building at a glance as a whole. I mean, you remember that when we were studying that everything has to be eye-level perspective, and I mean, we still criticize if students do not draw things on eye-level perspective, but only present something from bird's eye view, right? But is it true? Because our perception have changed, and the new kind of ways of perceiving architecture now, it's more about one kind of, let's say, gesture, which I think is because, which is why all these ornamental things are not so much well presented these days, because you don't see with the microscope, you see with a telescope, whatever, or the other way. But, you know what I'm saying? So I think going back to your question, that's why I think the form as an autonomous form is very important. Obviously they have to reflect the context. Obviously, that's kind of the basics of the role of the architects and or the responsibility of the architects. But because they're conceived as a form, and it goes back to the formless question that you had, that okay, the form doesn't have to be like a historic context, or it doesn't have to be attached to the historic context, but the form itself should have a meaning and conceived as a single thing. And when you do that, then shouldn't all other parts that construct the building be part of the form and part of the system, right? So like maybe like the last image that I'm showing on the screen can somewhat show that idea, that let's say if it is just about the form, we can get rid of all these let's say the structural elements that we see in the facade. But is it true? I think there are some moments that makes a building more than just a very simple mass, right? So that's how the aesthetic starts to function. So I think that's kind of how, so now it's not just about the forms, but form plus something else.
Yes, I really like how structure come into your project, and how, you know, each project actually express an idea of the structure. So I have one more question. How would you reference back to history in your study?
I mean, something like you asked in the beginning, whether we will call it as a fourth typology. I think there'll be a great complement. I think one of the reasons why we're pursuing this way is that we always thought that we want to put our kind of either not just a project, but this conversation on the lineage of architectural history, instead of just saying that, oh, I like this or I like that, right? So to put on the architectural lineage of history, then you always have to tackle back to something that's related to yours. So I think if you do that, by nature, you are still on the line, I'll say. But obviously, that's, as a practitioner, I don't think it's practitioner's role who can define whether I'm on the lineage of the architectural history or not. Maybe the historian or architectural critic will see our project and argue it that way. But at least we had that intention that these are some projects that we like, right? No matter whether we know why we like it or not, these are the projects we like. So they are the influencers to our project as well, right? So I think that's how we kind of hope that it is still part of the history.
Okay, let's see more questions from the students.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your lecture, and I want to ask you a question about: do you think contemporary architecture are freer than modern architecture? Because now we have like topological geometry and some new topology. So would you say it's freer than modern architecture, or actually we have to consider more restricts? So what's your opinion?
I think it's both, that we have more freedom, because I mean, as I showed you in the slides, that all these, let's say, crazy ideas are from the 20s by the constructivists, or from the 60s, 70s, those paper architects. Their ideas are somewhat reflected to the contemporary architects because the technology allowed it. So now we are living in the era where the human beings had the highest or the best technology ever. Tomorrow we'll even have better technology. Next year, even better. So at the moment, we are living in a era with, let's say, all this new technologies and construction methods and everything. So in that sense, we have much more freedom, I'll say. But that doesn't mean that, as you know, that the freedom doesn't mean that it's easy. For example, let's say let's say you're buying a car. I always like to make a metaphor with cars because I like cars. Let's say you're buying a car, and you don't have any budget limit. You don't have any whatever. You can buy whatever you want. You think that's easy? I don't think so. But let's say you have a budget limit that, oh, I only have $20,000, and there are only like 4 options, I'll say. Then you choose. But so I'm not talking about the construction budget here, but I'm just talking about the freedom. The freedom doesn't necessarily make our design process easier, but it makes even more critical, because there's no limitation in some other things. So you have to be self-critical about the process, about why you're pursuing this way rather than that way. Because now you cannot say that, because I cannot construct this one. I cannot make, let's say, 30-meter cantilever. Now you cannot say that, right? So now you have to be self-critical about why you want to have 30-meter cantilever instead of 10, something like that, right? So I think it's both, like much freer, but not so easier.
Okay, thank you.
缪斯问一个问题。
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it is more difficult to change the topology vertically than horizontally, because like you can move the floors, you can make it flexible horizontally, but you cannot cancel the columns, the pillars. So is it because of the gravity? Is it more difficult to make a big difference in the section topology of the section?
I mean, that's exactly true. I mean, I don't want to argue that because of the idea of topology, you can create almost a limitless forms as you want, because as you say that we need a flat slab to walk on, right? And there's a certain limit of the ramp if you want to make it as a ramp instead of stairs, right? So I think I'm like you say, when you cut in the section, there's always some limit. At the same time, I think that going back to the topology idea, that the relationship between the building and the three-dimensional context, I think that's also very important. Because, for example, I like the CCTV by OMA a lot. Not because of some other things, but because that creates a certain type of a view or the picture frame in the city that any other skyscraper were able to make, right? So that's the thing that probably, yes, the slab, it's just a stacked slab inside. But when it becomes that big, you should also think about the responsibility of that building to the city. And that's how RAM kind of responded to it. So these kind of imperfection of the skyscraper will make some conversation between our building and the city. And so in that sense, I'll say that it goes beyond the conversations of sections. It again goes back to the form itself, even though the sections still have boring slab, let's say.
Thank you.
More questions? Muse?
Actually, the relationship
I'm losing
between
you.
the technology development. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Can you repeat your question? Your connection is not very good.
Oh, okay.
Can you repeat your question? Say it again.
Okay.
断线了。断线了。
Oh.
你动它干嘛？你动它干嘛？这样啊，行了。它断线。
Hello. Hello.
I think we lost her.
Yeah, she's disconnected. Any more questions? Okay, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about time. Thank you, Dongwoo. It's a wonderful lecture and beautiful work. Thank you very much for the lecture.
Right now, we are having close to 1,000 audience outside the classroom.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I should have some makeup then.
Right. You already do. You already did. Okay, she's
Thanks
back
for having
on.
me. Thanks for having me. I'm so great to see you online. I hope that we all see each other in person soon.
Sure, in the near future.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
All right. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.